Sola Alabi.
Oyinkansola Alabi, popularly referred to as the Emotions Doctor. Oyinkansola Alabi is a productivity enhancement and life validation strategist. A psychologist by training, she helps individuals, achievers, and organizations increase performance using emotional intelligence tools and proprietary methodologies. The lead researcher and facilitator at Emotion City, Africa's leading center for emotional intelligence, where she has been a consultant and confidant to the various CEOs. She is the first female founder of an emotional intelligence academy in Africa. Her work has taken her to 30 states in Nigeria and 22 countries. She has also trained 277 emotional intelligence certified specialists in 14 countries. Oyinkansola is the first African to attend the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She is a 6-second network emotional intelligence practitioner and assessor and a Goldman Sachs scholar. She is also one of the 100 most influential and impactful women in Nigeria in 2019 and 2022. A doctor of philosophy in behavioral psychology, an author, a musical artist, and a spiritual leader. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Oyinkansola Alabi.
Beautiful morning in the city of Dallas. And it is my pleasure to be having this conversation with us. Thank you so much, Pastor Blessing, as we call you, Mrs. Ibukun Awosika. It's been 19 years of watching, learning, and submitting to your virtual and in-person leadership and authority. And I appreciate this conversation and for sharing this honorable platform with me and with Emotion City. Angela's story is very interesting. Mrs. Bisi Oyawoye, thank you so much. I will be sharing my story in 15 minutes. Couple of months before I was born, my father had stroke. He was 33. He was a doctor. And at 33, he already had 4 children. My mom was an educationist, and then my father was a doctor with 4 children. He was doing very well. I know some of his colleagues now, they're in their 70s and all. He was doing exceptionally well and all of that. But one day, my mother got a call, and it was the fact that her 33-year-old extroverted, handsome husband, was struck down, and then he was at the hospital. And that changed a lot of things, especially for my siblings. I'm 1 out of 4. I am the last born. I didn't have an idea my mother was pregnant. So my 3 siblings had a relationship with my father. They knew who my father was. I did not know. A couple of months after that, I was born. And, usually people say that they were born with silver spoons, golden spoons. I wasn't born with any spoon because as at that time, everything, about the house had turned. My father being down, my mother had 3 children. She was pregnant, and then she had a husband who had suddenly become paralyzed. And the journey started, and the journey was very tough. I remember growing up, and at the age of 5, I knew that we were poor. When a 5-year-old understands poverty, is a new level of poverty, because usually you may not have an idea until you're close to being a teenager. But I knew at age 5 that something was not aligning and something was not well. By the time I became a teenager, I knew that I didn't want to have a part of whatever that was. I like my parents. I respect my parents. My father, a good person. My mother, a good person. But in between all of that, they had a divorce. I do not know what happened, but of course, with 3 children and then an extra baby and a paralyzed husband, there's a tendency that your relationship will be, tested and all of that. And it ended in a divorce. Then my mother had to raise the 4 of us. Of course, my father couldn't because he was still paralyzed. And my mother had to provide, to protect, to work. And remember that while our parents are raising us, they are also raising themselves. So while you are a parent, you are parenting yourself, raising yourself, and trying to raise your children. So all of that happened, and it didn't go too well, not because they were not good people, but because life will show up and because no one is perfect in anything that they were doing. And I remember that when I was a teenager, I understood that I needed to design my life differently. I had tasted poverty. I had felt poverty. I was raised and bred in Mushin. So my earliest years were somewhere else in Ikeja, my grandparents' house. We had to be at my grandparents' house because, of course, we couldn't afford rent and so many other things till my mother, could move her to Mushin. Mushin also was my grandfather's house, but he was kind enough to give us a flat to be there. And I grew up there. Now, we shared a wall with a club. So there was absolutely no way I wasn't going to hear any song. Like every song that came out, be assured that I knew it. Not because I wanted to know the songs, but because the club would play all the songs from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. So automatically I became an internal DJ. you know one song to the other because you had heard the song repeatedly. And then every time I go to my worship center or I went to my worship center, while worship was going on, those songs were underneath. You have to keep fighting that battle. And I remember that sometimes on stage, when I had to officiate, I'm a spiritual leader, otherwise called a pastor. When I had to officiate, something will be saying to me that, may you not sing one of these songs because it's so much in your subconscious. By the time I became a teenager, a lot of things that happened to me, it would be the fact that because I'm the last born, some things happen to last borns in their house. Everybody dumps responsibilities on you. There's a tendency you may not be seen, and there was no capacity to be pampered or spoiled. So all of that grew up. I grew up, even though I was a kind child, there were so many internal battles that I was dealing with, and I knew that I didn't want to be a part of that. And the only way that I knew not to be a part of that was to feed my brain so that my brain can feed me. I will say that again. The only way I knew how to get out of this was to feed my brain so that my brain can feed me. And I remember going to college. College is university in Africa and in Nigeria. And when I got to college, it was my first time of tasting freedom. I'd gone to a boarding house before then. It was my first time of tasting freedom. So I used to dance a lot. They used to hire me to dance, and then my major dance was Makosa. And the song was Lepagau. I was anointed for it. Like if there's something called that, I was anointed for that kind of script. And I malfunctioned for a while. I malfunctioned for a while. I tried to do a lot of things, but my turning point was when I was in my room one day and my roommate was playing, at that time it was called a cassette player, like a cassette, not a CD, and this beautiful voice came on and she was talking about her life, do not have premarital sex, so many other things. I later got her name, went to look for her, and then I found her to be Pastor Mrs. Bimbo Jukoya. And, that was the turning point of my existence. And I'm 38 now. My father passed last year, November. He died at 72. So my father had stroke for 39 years. He was paralyzed for 39 years. One of the struggles I had to deal with was to love someone I didn't have a relationship with. One of the struggles I had to deal with was to have some financial responsibilities for someone I wasn't connected to. And then even though people called him my father, I called him my father. Initially, there was this pain and this sadness because I didn't see him as one. At no point was there any father-daughter conversation to that extent or anything. Yes, he was ill, but there were times he could talk and all of that. And the major thing for me was I was wondering why me. I was wondering why my friends would have like conversations with their fathers, gist with their fathers, share stories with their fathers. And I had none to share other than I had to be emotionally responsible, financially responsible. And because I was also a pastor, there was that burden. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you are told to love someone you don't have connections and feelings for. And then there's this script that says, honor your father and mother. And it looks like everybody expects you to do something and you are just not existing. Nobody sees you. Nobody hears you. Nobody even recognizes your own pain. So that was the story for me. It was a story of unforgiveness initially towards life and then initially towards my father. And then moving on to the fact that my siblings never understood. My siblings had feelings and emotions for my dad. I never had any. They would tell me so many things. I couldn't connect, and they felt like my lack of connection was because I was wicked, but they never understood that I was being burdened by what I wasn't interested in. And I had to like grow old or older or grow so fast just because of a lot of things. So I was very upset at a lot of things. And my story is from the retired nuisance to the emotions doctor. So people know me as the emotions doctor now, but the beginning of me being an emotions doctor was to have the most important meeting in the world, which happens to be the meeting with myself. And I said to myself, I cannot continue my life like this. I must look for how to alter my life and what to do differently. So I will sum it up by saying that at every point in time when we're experiencing emotional pain, there's something that may be tied to it, which is shame. Shame is a lethal weapon. Shame comes to drown you. Shame comes to paralyze you. And then the most important unique selling point that shame sprinkles and sprays you with is that feeling of I'm not good enough. Ange mentioned it at every point in time. Her mother did in a presentation of that feeling of, if you know what exactly how to feel when you have always succeeded and all of a sudden you are beginning to fail. And then shame begins to say to you, you are not as good as you thought you were. You are not really who you think you were. And then the moment shame can plant that self-doubt, guess what? It leads you into an identity crisis. And once there's an identity crisis, you're going to lose everything about yourself. So when shame started launching Angela into that feeling of you are not good enough, instead of being paralyzed by identity crisis, she decided to do something. And that formula is one thing that I will capture, which is a lot of things are going on in the world. All of us are ancestors. Can you please clap for yourself, actually? If you know what it is to survive a pandemic, please clap for yourself, because 100 years from now, they're going to be talking about you in 2020, how you survived a pandemic. Yes, you are an ancestor. Help me say to your neighbor, I am an ancestor. Respect me. I am an ancestor. So we all survived the pandemic and then the financial crisis and then the recession and so many shuns. And part of the shuns happen to be depression. And at every point in time, life has three colors. Life has three colors. Life has three colors: black, white, and gray. Black, white, and gray. The black and white areas of life are the areas where we pray and we like the responses. That's the area where you call it testimony. So, for example, you prayed for a promotion, you got a promotion. That's a testimony. You prayed for a child, you got a child. That's a testimony. You prayed for a wedding or a marriage and you got it. That's a beautiful testimony. That's the black and white areas of life that says, as you think it, you get it. As you pray, you get it. Those are the areas where you say what God cannot do does not exist. Those beautiful things. That's the black and white area of life. The gray area of life are the areas where we bind, we cast, we reject. Nobody wants it. But guess what? Life is a blend of black, white, and gray. We hate the gray, but we experience it. My mother's only brother died at the Dana crash. And I understand what it is to lose someone close to you in an aircraft. And this is me, who also has survived a pastor and a mentor and all of that. So those are the gray areas of life where I remember the day my father died, I was training. I was training and I still had 5 days more to train. So I was training for the whole week. And I was called that day that my father had passed on. I showed up a couple of hours after. I was called at night. I showed up a couple of hours after I trained. Nobody had an idea. And guess what I was training on? On emotional stability and emotional resilience. After 8 hours of training, I said to them, my father passed yesterday night. And all of them kept quiet. And they were like, how come? And I'm like, morning and afternoon is for training. Crying is at night. That's what life is, black, white, and gray. When gray shows up, we all hate it. And when gray shows up, it pushes us into this particular space where we would be sad and unhappy, legitimate emotions, legitimate feelings. All of us get to that point where we're sad and unhappy, very legitimate, and your emotions are very valid. So if you need to cry, even your creator wept. So it's okay to weep. Weeping is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. It's a sign of you saying, I want to ever quit. I want to, explore. I want to just let my guards down. You are not a silhouette. You are not a machine. You are not an emoji. You are human. And part of being human is being in touch with your feelings and feeling your feelings. The depression shows up at a point where you are experiencing prolonged sadness. There are some of you listening to me today. You know what brought you here. You know what brought you to Life Series. You know that you are looking, expecting. You just want to hear a word. Should I keep staying in my marriage? Should I leave my marriage? Should I take my life? Should I still be here? What is happening to this promotion? Should I leave this country? Whatever you are here for, I need you to first of all understand that all of us experience this. We all feel what we feel, and we all get served by life. We all get served by life. So if you ever get to that point where you are feeling unhappy or feeling depressed, here is the formula for happiness, the formula for unhappiness, and how to move at every point in time. Meaning, anytime you find yourself at the unhappiness zone or spectrum, what you must do to be back at the happiness level. Because if you do not do that, there's a tendency that if it's prolonged, you would experience depression. Are we on the same page? Excellent. Thank you. So let's look at it. The formula for happiness. Every time we say we're happy, what exactly does it mean? Here is what it means. Happiness is when your life conditions align with your blueprint. When your life conditions align with your blueprint. And what do I mean by this? Happiness simply means that when what you are expecting in life is what you are experiencing. If you expect a promotion, and you get a promotion, you would be happy. So when your expectation aligns with your experience, you will most likely be happy. You want to relocate, you get the capacity and the resources to relocate. You want to do something, you are getting it. You want an investment in your business, Jack Ma is there for you. You want anything, all of those resources are available. So happiness is when your expectation aligns with your experience. You will most likely be happy. You will most likely. At every point in time, you want a child, you get a child. You will most likely be happy. Happiness is that zone where as you pray to experience it, as you pray for it, you taste it, you smell it, you perceive it, you hold it. A lady wants to get married, she's married. You want to be happily married, you're happily married. You want this, you get it. That is happiness. That is the zone where all of us are excited. All of us dance. We do buga. We do all of those beautiful things. We post pictures. We just experience the beautiful hormones and everything that comes with it. But guess what? Unhappiness is the same thing, but there's a little difference. Unhappiness is when your expectations do not align with your experience. When your expectations do not align with your experience. At that point, some things will show up. Number one, disappointment. When disappointment shows up, you will be unhappy. Number two, dissatisfaction. When dissatisfaction shows up, you will be unhappy. Dissatisfaction simply means what you want is not what you are tasting, what you're feeling, what you're hearing, what you're experiencing. And then shame may sneak in. Shame is that permanent shadow that is always looking for attention, always looking to take over, always looking to control. And you must understand how to identify shame. So every time you feel unhappy, I will show you how to move back to the happiness stage. Every time you feel unhappy, number one, it is okay to experience unhappiness. It is okay to experience sadness. What is not okay is for us to drown in it. So, for example, all the while that a lot of things were going on in my house, all the while that we're going through so many things, like there were so many things that we all had to do to be able to feed ourselves. My siblings had to be responsible. I had to be responsible. My mother had to raise 4 children. Definitely that was not how she planned her life. Nobody goes to the altar and says that in 6 years, my husband must have stroke. Amen. And then you have 4 children. Nobody really does that. So definitely unhappiness must have happened to my mother. She must have been served by life. And then if you understand what it is for you to be unhappy, dissatisfied, and disappointed, and then you have 4 children to raise, children who didn't ask to be born, children who didn't choose who gave birth to them, and children who didn't choose their background. But here we all are. And what did I do differently to get out of mushing? First of all, get out of poverty. Secondly, what did I have to do to be diligent and to say to myself, you know what, though my background is not tasty, my future has to be tasty. What am I going to do differently? Here is the formula that I did. So you know what it is when you're happy, your experience is aligning with your expectation. When you're unhappy, your expectation is not aligning with your experience. And then what must we do at every particular time? Every time you feel shame, you feel unhappiness, you feel disappointed, you feel dissatisfied in whatever area of your life, what must you do? Because these things will happen, but you need a tool. You need a tool. And the tool that I'm going to give you is called the triple S, SSS. What does SSS mean? The triple S, SSS. Now, every time you wake up, and you use your deodorant and your perfume, SSS must be in your pocket. SSS must be in your wallet. SSS must be in your soul. SSS must be when you're driving. SSS must be in your closet. It must be in your car. It must be everywhere. You are with your Bible and you are seeing SSS. You are singing, you are seeing SSS. SSS must be in you. It must be your DNA at this particular time. So what exactly is SSS? How do we navigate SSS? In 5 minutes, the first, in no particular order, it is strategy, story, and state. Change your strategy, change your story, change your state. What does it mean to change our strategy? Number one, if you set an expectation, remember that happiness means expectation is aligning with experience. Expectation is aligning with experience. What you're expecting is what you're experiencing. That is happiness. Now, strategy. If what you are experiencing is not aligning with what you expected, guess what? You can go back to the drawing table and change your expectation. That is strategy. You may not be able to alter your experience because sometimes you are not in control, but you can alter your expectation. What does that mean? If you say to me that, oh, ED, I wanted to get married at 30, now I am 37 and I am unhappy and sad, it's okay. But guess what? You can move that 30 to 40. And that solves a whole lot of problem for you. You know why? It moves you out of desperation. It moves you out of dissatisfaction. It moves you out of pressure. It moves you out of unhappiness. And it furnishes you with clarity. You still have 3 more years. 3 more years to remember that there are 195 countries in this world you can choose from and 8 billion awesome people. And as long as you exist and you're single, guess what? Your spouse is single. God did not create you to snatch. Your spouse is single. And somebody as kind and compassionate and good as you are exists for you. So you can proceed to change your strategy. You can adjust your vision board. You can adjust your subconscious board. You can go there and say, what I'm experiencing is different, but what I have control over is my strategy. What must I do differently? What must I do differently? So if your experience is not aligning with your expectations, if another thing is you thought that by 2020, you should have made your first $5 million, and now it is 2022, you are still struggling to make your first $2 million, the first thing you need to do at the strategy session is to move that 2022 or 2020 to 2023 or 2025 and say to yourself, what must I do differently henceforth? Who do I need? Who must I work with? That is strategy. Those are the things we have control over. Your vision board. Your vision board is not static. Life can serve you what you didn't expect, and you need to adjust it. I've been wearing glasses, for example, since I was 10, 28 years from now. Some other people will bind and cast. But guess what? It is my responsibility to put on my glasses, to use my medication if there's any that I'm using, and to use my eye drop. Those are the things I have control over. Those are the things that I have control over, to take care of myself, not to cry and wallow and say, why am I the one wearing glasses? Why am I the one doing this? Why am I the one doing that? I need to be able to control what I have the capacity to control. So that is strategy. The second thing you need to pay attention to, remember what we're talking about, 3 ways to move from unhappiness to happiness every time. The first is change your strategy. The second is change your story. What stories do you tell yourself? What is in your subconscious mind? I've never met one person who said to themselves every day or daily that I will never succeed, I will never succeed, I will never succeed, and they succeeded. Let me give you an example. If I say to you now that you should say some words after me, there's a tendency you won't say those words because you don't even want to joke with them. So if I say to you, for example, to say that you have cancer, you will be blind and be dead by your next birthday. If I say that to you to repeat after me, would you say it? You most likely say, God forbid. Oh no, I reject it. You know the reason why, even as a joke, you don't want to play with your words. You don't want to utter those words because your subconscious says to you that those words may come to pass. And you're saying, no, I'm not going to do this, even as a joke. So if you think that the negative can come to pass, even if it's a joke, how much more the power you have in the positive? Can you see that you carry the power of life and death in your tongue? So the next time you're going to open your mouth to say anything, you're not going to say, I won't make it in my country. I won't get married at this time. You are not going to cross yourself. Imagine if you were recording your conversations with yourself, your internal conversations. Imagine if you were recording them and people listen to them. People will not even know that it's you. They will actually say to you, whoever is talking to you like this, you should avoid that person. So what stories do you say to yourself? Every morning when I wake up, I remind myself, I am love and love dwells in me. I am an oracle. I'm a consultant. The Spirit of God lives inside of me. Every time I speak, I am an encounter. Every soul that I get in touch with understands that I carry power. I carry life. My belly carries life. Those are the conversations I have with myself. Despite what I see, there may be recession, but I am not of here. The Lord is my shepherd. So I don't want to know who you bow to or worship or defer to, but you must be connected with who created you. And your connection is tied to your words. So what exactly do you say to yourself? Are your words beautiful enough for your life to feel beautiful, to taste beautiful? Guess what? You can actually say, but I've been saying this is not happening. What I need you to do is when you're saying it, connect with it. Don't just say it because you are in the bathroom or you are making food. No, as you say it, begin to think what you're saying. Invest something in your subconscious to the point where your subconscious can take over, because your subconscious is 95% of you. All of us listening to me today, including Mrs. Awosika, I've been studying her for 19 years. I used to run a company called Merchants of Romance, and she was one of my clients. If there's anybody that you want to talk about tied to emotional resilience, it is Mrs. Awosika right in front of you. You see her as a super achiever, sitting on series of boards globally and all of that. Guess what? The higher you go, the more success you taste, the more failures you would experience. So if you're admiring her and looking at her today, you are looking at someone who has failed as much as she succeeded. Do you want to imagine how many times she's cried? Do you want to imagine how many times she's wept? If you see her preaching on stage in church, you will know that this woman lives in the wilderness. When she speaks, we all listen because we know that she has a story. We know that she has a strategy. And the final one is change your state. What does state mean? State is your body language, your physiology. All Nigerians were raised with body language. If you followed your mother out and your mother says to you at home, don't eat where we are going. Don't eat, we all eat where we are going. And then you get to that destination and then they now want to buy your soul with small chops. You know, it's at that point that small chops is hot and then it will be smelling sweet. Then your mother will look at you with just one small corner, you know, full are you? Just small. It's reset. And then the servers will not say, oh, you don't want? No, I'm okay. Then one auntie that the enemy wants to use will not say, I eat now. And your mother will be using the corner eye to set you like, hey. I know that when you miss it outside, they don't beat you on time. It's midnight beating. I don't know if it used to happen to you. They will remove their shoe at like 12 midnight. They will now crawl into your room. You will now hear, pow. If I hear, pim, change your state. Your state is your body language. Your state is how you carry yourself. Your state is how you present yourself to the world. Your strategy, your story, and your state must align for you to always move from a place of unhappiness to happiness. You can do it because I've done it. You can do it because Angela did it. You can do it because Mrs. Bisi Sojoya did it. You can do it because Mrs. Awosika did it. You can do it because even the one that created you said, and David encouraged himself, Jesus wept, but after weeping, he went on to wake up Lazarus. That's a blend. That's life right there. After he wept, he proceeded to say, Lazarus, come forth. So today I call your soul forth. Today I call your spirit forth. That thing that is saying to you to give up, hell no, not on our watch. Because I know that he that created you with strength, created you with emotional resilience, and created you with power. Yes, I know that the tears are there, but guess what? We've all cried before. We may most likely still cry again. But while all of that is going on, we remember who our shepherd is. We remember who called us. We remember whose we are, and we remember who we are. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Pastor Blessing. Have a fantastic, fantastic week. And I am rooting for you. Namaste.
The young have really grown. You know, Oyinka was one of my children in church. A youth pastor, a young adult. I watched them grow in church. And I'm ever so proud of all these young Fountainers doing amazing things on their own, which shows that just teach the children right. Lead them in the right way. They'll find their own voice in their own generation. You know, and she's doing an amazing work in a sector that our generation cannot solve. So BC is a star that she's involved in that. Because why? Most of our generation are in denial when it comes to mental health issues. They can't even comprehend or deal with it. If you mention it, they will tell you about your father that sent something or the gods of your father's house that are speaking. Otherwise, they will say, I reject it in Jesus' name. You know, so we're missing the point, but they're raising points that are critical. And it's good for all of us to pay attention. I hope that as you go out of here today at the end, you would remember there's no shame in being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with moments when you're not able on your own to do everything that you need to do. We need help when we need help. And we should ask for it because help is available. The reason we made this critical part of today is because the temperature in town right now, there are issues, and we need to be honest. We always have like a town hall amongst ourselves and decide what are the pressing issues. Those are the things we want to deal with. We don't want to just have a nice session, but we want to have practical, productive sessions.